Hi, I'm Benton Stokes.
And I'm Elaine O'Rourke.
And this is Cocktail Theology.
This is work. See, okay, so I was having a conversation today about the difference between work and play. And Dallas Willard, who will become important in this conversation, Dallas Willard said something along the lines, I'm not going to quote him correctly, but Dallas Willard said something about play is work that isn't productive of anything necessary.
Okay.
So he had this idea that play was productive, activities productive, but that play produces stuff that you don't have to have or doesn't have to be done.
Okay, I can follow that.
So here's the question. Is cocktail theology work or play?
Well, I mean, I think we are producing something meaningful and worthwhile, so by that definition it would be work, but we do this when we're not trying to produce something meaningful and productive, so I think the process of doing it kind of feels like play, but we actually have an end result that then we do something with, which becomes productive.
So what I'm hearing is these times that we are together, staring at each other, you wearing headphones, me hoping that I'm getting recorded because it's all about me, that really what this is, it's the perfect blend of work and play.
I think so.
This is our perfect life right here.
Wow, why don't we do this more?
Why do we do other stuff?
Why do we do anything else? Yes.
Yes. So hi everybody. So we are drinking tonight a Pinot Noir from Northern California, from Zeka, that's Zeka Vineyards. It's a new vineyard. So we are actually drinking their 2015 Pinot Noir. It was their first release, and I think it's now, after 3 years, it's kind of reaching the point where it's really yummy. I'm very happy about it. So that's Zeka Vineyards, that's ZekaVineyards.com. You can buy it online, but if you're a Pinot drinker, check out Zeka Vineyards.
Yes.
And you just got back from a little mini vacay.
Just went to Los Angeles for a few days.
Which was great.
Which is great.
And you went to Bob's Big Boy.
I did go to Bob's Big Boy. One of the silly indulgences that I have in my email, among others, but most of them get deleted. One of the ones that I pay attention to is Thrillist. And Thrillist often does rankings of 10 best...
Blah, blah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And this particular ranking was 10 best diners in America.
Oh,
and
that's how you got to Bob's.
So I grew up in Nashville, and we had Shoney's Big Boy. So we had the Big Boy burgers, we had the hot fudge cake, we had the milkshakes and the Coke floats.
But did you have the Big Boy?
Yeah, and we had the Big Boy sculpture.
Oh, that's so painful for me to think about. Go on.
I loved Shoney's, and then at some point, I think I was probably in high school, Shoney's dropped the Big Boy.
Yeah, because it largely went out of business.
Yeah, and so Shoney's sort of turned their attention somewhere else and tried to be something other than diner food, right? And so I love that whole, I mean, it was nostalgic and everything, but that whole thing, complete with the curb service drive up.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
All of that was still intact in Burbank at Bob's Big Boy. I grew up with that, with the drive up, curb service, and the whole bit. Yeah.
There's a doctoral thesis in this. Wow.
And I got the burger, and I wanted the hot fudge cake, but I was just stuffed by the time it was over, and it's not the kind of thing you can take home because it has ice cream in it. So I'll have to get that next time. But it was such a fun experience to relive the burger. We ate at the counter and had the burger and the fries and the cherry Coke, and it was just fun.
So as somebody who grew up with that Bob's Big Boy and all the other Bob's Big Boys in California, it is fascinating for me to hear that.
Hear what? What part of it?
Yes.
All of it?
Well, the fact that it was franchised out to Shoney's, the fact that you grew up with a version of it. So they declared bankruptcy a long time ago now. And when they did, like, all of the big boys, the statues were stolen at night by people wanting the statues before they disappeared.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right.
It was a classic thing when I was growing up. Not that I ever did it. to decorate the Bob's Big Boys at night when they were closed. Mm-hmm. We're not in that era anymore.
No.
The era of Bob's Big Boy, when it was really Bob's Big Boy, was an era of permanent nostalgia.
Yeah.
And if I were still in academia, I would say it was before deconstruction took over everything, before postmodernism took over everything. Bob's Big Boy was one of those places that automatically carried nostalgia, and I'm not sure we have any of those anymore. I mean, it's sort of like, I'm thinking about all those movies where an adult, for some reason, is sent back to their high school.
Sure.
And what happens is they're sent back to somebody else's glory days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have to go back and kind of figure out how they're going to live through that and what they're going to do differently and all that. But there was an era in the United States, and I suspect in other places, where nostalgia was always present. So, in Nashville, we have the Woolworths.
Yeah.
Which is not Woolworths.
Right.
And does nothing that Woolworths would have recognized.
Right.
But it's a reinvention of a nostalgia.
Yes.
And completely tweaking it.
Uh-huh.
So when I was growing up, Bob's Big Boy, Woolworths, those were all going, I mean, Woolworths particularly was going away by the time I was growing up.
Yeah.
But there was this basic, deep down nostalgia. Bob's Big Boy, for you, still has a tiny bit of that nostalgia. And it makes me think, those moments, those icons, those movies, whatever it is, that we have this idealized affection for.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Yeah.
So the Big Boy thing actually just makes me think of that. It's so interesting. I'm trying to think of anything I have that about now that's commercial. I don't think I do. I think I'm way too much a product of academic deconstruction. Foucault. Carry on.
Yeah, so that was a great deal of fun to go back and kind of relive that. It was great.
Do you like how I can destroy vacation right there? Oh, yeah. Okay. So what's our topic for tonight, my friend?
Tonight we're kind of talking about, as we are apt to do, about moving on, but tonight specifically talking about when is it time to take something or someone you idolize, admire to the point of idolizing, off the pedestal. For myself, I mean, I can think of musicians and songwriters that over the years have been a great influence on me. If they were in town, I would always make a point of seeing them, would read their lyrics, pay attention to everything that was going on with them. And as time has gone on, pretty much all of them have fallen by the wayside at some point. Either it's like I outgrew what they do, which sometimes happens simply because they may refuse to move on with their generation, and they try to hold on to youth, or trying to hold on to appealing to a younger generation. Some of it is your idol does something you don't like, something you don't approve of, or something that feels out of character for the persona that you see, the persona that you experience.
Sure.
You know, if you grew up with the Rolling Stones and Mick Jagger, or if you grew up with the Beatles and Paul McCartney, there's a certain aura about Mick Jagger or a certain aura about Paul McCartney until they put out a crappy album. And then you're like, what in the hell is this? At some point, your bubble gets popped, and you think, he isn't who I thought he was. Or there's something about this that doesn't feel true or right or whatever, and you feel a little bit betrayed.
I'm a little distracted by the fact that Paul McCartney just dropped a new album.
He did just drop a new album. Have you heard any of it?
One song.
Yeah.
I was listening to it with my daughter, and I went, wow, that's interesting. Oh my God, Sir Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, you go, old man. Well done.
Right.
But separate from that, see, so you're talking about disillusionment, and particularly disillusionment based on an event. That's what I hear.
It can be that.
Okay.
I don't think that's the only iteration of this, but I think it can be that.
Okay.
I think it can also be that you just you move on. You outgrow.
Absolutely.
The influence is no longer as powerful as it used to be.
Yeah.
But then there are some folks that will keep someone on a pedestal forever. So what is it that makes somebody hold on to an idol, a person that they admire so much for so long? And in many cases, I mean, these are people that have moved on. You have fans of Elvis, for instance, that will go to Graceland every year on a pilgrimage.
My mother-in-law got winked at by Elvis.
Really?
I've heard this story a number of times now.
I'm sure you have. And he had that sway. He had that mystique. He had that influence over people, and they continue to be influenced by him. I don't know. Maybe that's not a great example.
No, I think it's a perfect example. So if you think about Elvis, we're talking about Elvis Presley for those of you who may be too young to know who we're talking about. And I think for some people, either when he went on to be kind of the white jumpsuit, overweight Vegas Elvis, that was one of those possibilities where people let him off his pedestal. Mm-hmm. When drug addiction became clear, or any of those particular failings became clear, I think that was another time when people let him off his pedestal. I wonder whether people who keep Elvis on a pedestal, it really has almost nothing to do with Elvis. Elvis is a symbol for a time in their lives.
Yeah, I bet you're right about that. For some, it's not just a person that they idolize or a persona that they put on a pedestal, but it could be a period of their life. Mm-hmm. I mean, some people have glory days, and they hold on to those glory days. Like, that was their moment in the sun.
That's right.
They don't recognize that maybe they could be capable of having another moment in the sun.
But it's not the same.
But it's not the same.
That not the same is such a painful thing. We were talking about how there are movies that are made about this.
Oh, yeah.
Where, somebody's 40, they're suddenly transported back to high school, and they have to figure out how they're going to be and what they're going to do and all of that. And in those movies, there was always the captain of the football team, leader of the cheer squad, that person who was, in your 16-year-old eyes, perfect. Had everything. Had the friends, had the esteem, had the familiarity, could go into the local Bob's Big Boy and get a shake, and people would come over, all of that. That sense of being important. They had that.
Yeah.
And so in these movies, the main character goes back and visits these people and sees it, but has that perspective and knows how they turned out and is sort of mystified by his or her, it's usually her own idealization of that time.
Yeah.
When Lennon died, Lenin, not Lennon,
right.
Since we've already talked about Sir Paul. When Lennon died, they embalmed him and put him in a glass casket, and left him to be able to be venerated. And it really was veneration. There's something about that image that has always stuck with me as being incredibly wrong. No judgment on Lennon. Bad, good, indifferent, doesn't matter to me. But that sense that you want to go and remember somebody, particularly somebody you didn't know, in this very specific role and pattern and symbology that has almost nothing to do with your actual life.
Right.
So those two things are different, right? The wanting to remember a period of time that you have some nostalgia over, and wanting to remember a person as a non-person, as a god.
Yeah. Recently I watched, I think I'll get the name of this right, 11/22/63, which was a Netflix original about the assassination of JFK, but it was a fictionalized take on the whole thing, of course. Sure. Stephen King and J.J. Abrams, I think, did it.
Oh, well.
It's very good. But that is a period of history that many Americans look at nostalgically.
That's before you were born.
Yeah, it's before I was born.
Right, okay. Carry on. Sorry.
So that is a period of history that a lot of Americans look back to. And JFK, of course, is one of those figures. And so you have this very romanticized version of those few years of history that continues to sort of get perpetuated and passed down because there are folks that lived through it that remember it so fondly. Mm-hmm. Of course, JFK had faults, and we know about some of them, and there were probably many, many more.
Sure.
But just like Elvis had faults that people want to look past, and other public figures have faults that they want to look past, it's like you pick and choose what you remember mm-hmm. and lift up. Mm-hmm. I think that JFK, for many people, particularly those that lived during the time, but not necessarily, JFK is sort of the prototype for a great president. He was such a charismatic, young. There was a glamour around him and his family and his wife. There was a mystique.
And it was something we could aspire to without actually having any hope of getting there.
Yes, very aspirational.
So, my very first memory, and it's the only memory I can think of that I actually remember rather than having had related to me, and I remember the story. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that most of our memories are based on story. Mm-hmm. This is the only memory that is one of those gut memories. I remember being very, very, very sick, drinking 7-Up, and my mother crying watching TV. So I was sick with bronchitis for a year and a half.
Oh boy.
When I was little. Mm. The 7-Up would have been what you drank in Texas when you were a baby to just get sugar and stuff down.
Oh, we did that in Tennessee too, yeah.
My mother crying watching TV could only have been John F. Kennedy. Mm. So my first memory is being sick, drinking 7-Up, my mom crying. It has to have been the whole JFK thing.
Sure.
So growing up after that, a lot of my friends' families were Catholic. Mm-hmm. And JFK was right next to the Pope in every house.
Wow, yeah.
Well, of course, the reason was not because they loved his policies or anything, but because he was the first Catholic. He was the first time that Catholics were no longer of the devil for the Protestants. Yeah. Right? And so his picture, like there'd be the commemorative plates and the commemorative plates of the Pope, and they would be right next to each other. And growing up as I did, where JFK was a political figure and all of that, I found that veneration fascinating, even as a child. But I do think that JFK is a great example of a blending of both of those. Both a time, like his killing, I think, was a breaking of innocence in a particular way.
Absolutely.
Like the death of John Kennedy was the end of the 50s. Mm-hmm. So there's that nostalgia. But he also was that aspirational character, that perfect character, the whole Camelot mythology. Right. So there's the glass box.
Yeah.
Right? It's a great example. So as you know, and as some of our listeners know, when I am known beyond this room, very often it's because of my familiarity with Dallas Willard, the Christian philosopher Dallas Willard, and I wrote a little book called A Dallas Willard Dictionary, where I tried to explain in non-Dallas Willard terms what Dallas Willard meant by Dallas Willard terms. And I've taken so much heat for not just using his words over and over.
Have you?
Yes. Okay, so I have to say this. So I've taken a lot of heat for using my own words to try to explain Dallas, as if yelling at people in Dallas's words
is going to make them more clear.
It always cracks me up. It's a little bit like when somebody comes up to you and they're speaking Spanish and you yell English at them because that'll help.
Because that'll help, right?
Anyway, so Dallas died a number of years ago now. I mean, it was a huge loss for me personally and for many other people. I remember getting the phone call about his death. I remember crying with the person on the phone, calling other people and saying, have you talked to the family, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, one of the things that has been very frustrating to me is the putting Dallas Willard in a glass box.
Yeah.
Because he was not perfect. His philosophy was not perfect. His theology was not perfect. But the inability to critique it makes him Lenin for me.
Yeah, right.
And I truly understand his particular importance in so many people's understanding of God and their theology and the kind of person he was. I still miss him on a regular personal basis.
Sure.
But he wasn't God. And that inability to critique, the inability to say, well, this was good, this was flawed, here's what was great, the making of people either perfect or condemned is a tragedy. Mm-hmm. Because it renders them trivial. To me, if you can't listen to what somebody's done and critique it and enjoy it and critique it and enjoy it,
yeah,
they die. Their work dies. If my kid listens to your music and only hears her love of you personally, your music is irrelevant.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If somebody reads the work of Dallas and studies it and just adores him, but is unable to read parts that are just clearly imperfect, it makes a mockery of the work. It has to be living work. Mm-hmm. If we can't look at JFK and say, well, this worked, this didn't, this was interesting, this wasn't, wow, look at that, wow, how'd that influence, wow, all that. If we can't look at Elvis and say, oh, isn't that interesting, that basically he brought African-American music to the white public and made it acceptable for them, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, if we can't look at that, he becomes a caricature.
Right.
I think what bothers me, why do I say that in every single episode? I think what bothers me, basically the world bothers me. Every time that we're not here doing this, the world bothers me.
Sure.
Sure.
I get it.
All right. So, I want to kind of divert a little bit. What strikes me in all of what we're saying is people's trouble with Jesus. He nods. As you know, when we're in class, sometimes I will say things like, Jesus peed standing up. People will be horrified. Horrified. I will see it on their faces, like, the idea that Jesus urinated, that his body worked like bodies work, is shocking.
Right.
If you hold to the idea that Jesus of Nazareth was both human and divine, then he urinated. He ate. He did all those things. Otherwise, all of that is nonsense.
Right.
If we can't hold at the same time that Jesus was special and interesting and powerful and all of those things, no matter whether you go from just really brilliant human to divine, doesn't matter where on the spectrum you are. If you can't hold that, and he had digestive processes, he found people attractive, he had a wet dream when he was 12, whatever the thing is. If you can't hold both of those at the same time, you're making him into nothing.
Right.
He becomes irrelevant.
Right, because his divinity and his humanity are equally important.
Either we take Jesus of Nazareth as fully divine, and then therefore...
Right, didn't pee.
Didn't pee, or if you're JFK, plate next to the Pope.
Yeah.
Right? Or we take him as fully human, which would be, okay, he did all of that, but healings, forget that. Or if you're thinking about JFK, you think about the adultery, you think about whatever.
Right.
We are so uncomfortable with holding what we feel are contradictions. So the idea that Jesus could be both human, finds people attractive, has a wet dream, pees standing up, whatever the thing is, or divine, meaning is completely God but nice and forgives everybody and is gentle and is really Gandhi but early, with hair, whatever the thing is, whatever the ridiculous thing is. Or if you're JFK, I mean, like it's always struck me that if Kennedy had lived through the first term, no one would remember him in the second. I mean, it just wouldn't matter, right? If Jesus had died at 50...
Yeah, there is something about icons being snatched in their prime.
Yes. How many people who are young right now, your kids, how many of them know who George Burns is?
I can't imagine my kids know who
None.
George Burns is.
But I bet if you press them, they would know who Che Guevara is or could figure that one out.
Or James Dean.
Or James... Right?
Yep. Or Buddy Holly. Or Patsy Cline.
So when is the time to let go of icons? I would say the time to grab onto icons is when they become human. That's when they get interesting. And probably the time to let go of icons for most people is when they become human.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a bazillion dollars made, a whole industry around making celebrities human. So, for instance, when Britney Spears goes out without makeup and a sweatshirt, and the paparazzi takes a picture and it ends up on the cover of the Sun, it's like there's a whole industry supported on the idea that we're going to bring down celebrities.
Oh, but that's not about making them human, is it? It's about making them fallen divinities. They become Lucifer.
Yeah.
Right? They don't become human. They become Lucifer.
So why is it that people eat that stuff up too?
Because we like scapegoats. We like darkness. We like, I am better than.
Yeah.
Yeah. But complexity's hard.
Complexity is hard. Yeah, it's hard to hold them both. You're right.
But people don't get interesting until they're both, in my view.
It's true.
When I found out that Martin Luther King Jr. had multiple affairs, I was like, oh, now he's interesting. Because before that, for me, growing up at the time I did, he was just somebody who was, brave and valiant and spouted smart things, and then died young. But after that, he became a person who had to overcome his own demons, who had to live in multiple worlds. Mm-hmm. To me, that's interesting. I get no hope for my own life from somebody who is an idle and perfect. Because I am never going to be an idle and perfect.
Right.
But if I can think about somebody who is really flawed but still managed to do something, that's something hopeful for me.
Absolutely.
Personally, I don't want glory days. I want to watch you be the best self you can be, whoever you are. With all the flaws and all of the breakages and all of the scars and all of the joys and all of the temptations and all of the mess that every single human being is. That's what gives me hope. If Jesus never looked at a boy or a girl and went, wow, he's irrelevant to me as a human being.
Right. Well, the power of who Jesus was is really, in my view, comes from his humanity.
Well, right. But I think that's true, I hope for you listeners that that's true in general. That when people become human, that's when they give us real hope for ourselves.
Right.
Because we are human, we are complex, we are challenging, we are flawed. I go out with my shirt on inside out. I hope that the people I hold up in high esteem once in a while go out with their shirts inside out. Otherwise, there's no hope for me, because I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah, I want to see the entire thing. I saw little bits and pieces of a 6-hour series that ABC did on the Royals.
Yeah. It keeps getting advertised to me on Netflix, and I haven't watched it.
So good. An important piece that I managed to get was around the death of Princess Diana. It was really interesting because in the half hour or so that I got to watch, they're setting up her death and everything that happened in the months prior and her separation and divorce from Prince Charles and how the royal family was really grappling. And when I say the royal family, I really mean the Queen, grappling with what to
do with it.
Because Princess Diana, as we know, was beloved and revered and iconic, and was doing, to her credit, some amazing work around the world. And so the Queen didn't necessarily want to sever,
right,
and yet needed to be able to defend her son,
Prince Charles,
right, to uphold a certain standard, right? Well, when Diana died, all bets were off.
That's right, because all the dirt comes up at that point, too.
The Queen did some unprecedented things, which I learned a little bit about Queen Elizabeth and have a tremendous respect for her. She addressed the kingdom. Again, this is somebody that was no longer a part of her family. Addressed the kingdom, did it in a way that was very compassionate and motherly. They talked about how she mentioned her grandchildren. Oh, she was amazing. And I remember that. And how human she became. And she, at that point, had this reputation of being very steely and cold. And so she addresses the kingdom. She lowers all of the flags in the entire kingdom to half-mast. The flag over Windsor Castle had never, ever been lowered to half-mast for anyone, ever. She ordered the flags lowered to half-mast in the entire kingdom to honor Princess Diana. And then, when there was a funeral procession for her, they paraded her through the streets. Yeah. It was amazing. Paraded her body through the streets. And the Queen led the royal family, her kids, her son, down to the street where the people were. And there's this iconic photograph of her bowing her head as Princess Diana passes in the procession, where she's down there with the people. I was so blown away by that, because while I was aware and moved by the events of what had happened around Princess Diana's death, I was unaware of how moved the Queen had been by all of that. Seeing that was like, wow, here is somebody who is truly one of the most powerful people in the world, and she recognizes the power and beauty in this one person and is willing to bow her head to that. But it's very interesting, because to me, and maybe it's the reporting and maybe it's the way it was presented, but to me it didn't seem as though it was something that she felt like she had to do, and it didn't seem as though it was something that she did simply because Diana had been her daughter. But it was more a response to how the people felt about her. And it was important that she acknowledged that she acknowledged their grief, that she acknowledged what they had lost. Yes. Yes. And the double-edged sword of that is both she's acknowledging what the people have lost, she's acknowledging the loss that her son is feeling regardless of their relationship. Of course. She's also understanding the optics. Sure. And Queen Elizabeth II has never been stupid. No, she's brilliant. And when I say all of that about the many levels on which she has to think, and the many levels on which she needed to face Diana's death, my saying that she was aware of optics is not a criticism. It's the fact that we are layered creatures. I think we should never let go of our icons, but we should allow them to become human. And that every human we should allow to become an icon from time to time. We're both immortals and brilliant and full of hope and possibility and capacity. And we are flawed and fallible and fragile and a mess and beautiful. We're all of those things. Every single one of us. And I would say, including Dallas Willard, including Jesus, including Elvis. I know I just lumped Jesus in with Elvis, but I'm not the first. Including Diana, including... You know that I still have a little kind of like fan crush on you, right? How is that? Well, you were Benton Stokes before you were Benton Stokes. Yeah. To me. Yeah. So, a little bit of a fan crush. But luckily I know that you know, like have hairy legs, so we're good. It's true. What's coming up for us, my friend? We have a retreat coming up. So much, yeah. We have a retreat coming up on October 20th, The Really Real God, which really addresses our ideas and perceptions around who God is, who we are to God, in God's kingdom. And tries to deflate some of the falsehoods we feel about ourselves. Yes. And inflate the reality of God. Right, right, which is huge. It's huge. And is a very impactful, powerful study, and we're doing it in a one-day format. From morning to night, we'll have food, we'll have music and worship, we'll have art, we'll have conversation. It'll be great. Elane will talk, I'll sing and play a little, and it'll be great. We would love to have you join us. So check us out at reallyrealgod.com or schoolforseekers.com and get more information. We would so love to have you here in Nashville to join us for that in October. We would. October 20th is the date.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you guys a secret. Benton has music coming out towards the end of this year and going into next year. I am so excited. Pay attention.
I do. And I'm excited to share a new single in October, so that's coming up soon.
And if you want to support the work we do for Cocktail Theology, please go to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Cocktail Theology, one word. It's really useful to us if you give even a little bit per month. Yeah. It helps keep all of this going, keeps the lights on, keeps the batteries in the Zoom, which sometimes die. But it feeds the dog. It's like everything that we need, it keeps it going.
Yeah, sure does. So thank you for supporting us that way. Please tell your friends. Please, please, please.
Yeah.
That's a huge help to us. And subscribe if you've been listening to the podcast occasionally. Even if you don't catch every episode, if you subscribe, that really helps other people find us because it bumps us up in the Google universe. So
and the iTunes universe and all those universes.
All those universes. So subscribe and tell your friends. That's the best possible promotion and marketing we could ever have.
So if you die before I do, can I put you in a little glass coffin?
Oh, please don't.
Okay. Fair enough. Good night, everybody.
Bye.